Good afternoon and welcome, fellow MCIEF members and TRS designees. Rich Bren here today. I am the gentleman that has the opportunity to do this hosting on behalf of the MCIEF. Mr. Ruke was unable to help in this process this month, so it's my honor and my great opportunity to be a part of something that I know and believe in. And without further ado, let's just touch upon what we're doing here today. Each month, as you know, we have these truck stop webinars. The webinars are held the second Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. These are the ongoing industry updates or informational purposes only. These do not qualify for the state CE credits. If you are seeking the CE credits, just simply follow up with TRS at ibci.net and you will obtain the information that we have on the ongoing CE programs. If you have any questions, if anything comes to mind as this presentation goes on, please utilize the chat window and these will be answered as time allows, or you'll be receiving a follow-up in an email format after the webinar. If you do have any problems with the audio or the presentation, you can drop a note in the chat window or you can call in at the 800 number. An attempt will be made to correct that problem as soon as possible. Again, Rich Bren here, welcoming you, thanking you for participating in this monthly webinar. Today is a unique opportunity for us to learn about an organization that is receiving support throughout the trucking industry. I appreciate the way that Truckers Against Trafficking, also called TAT or TAT as an abbreviation or acronym, is engaging people to help people. Lives are being saved and changed. Legislation and enforcement is also changing too as a support mechanism to improve our society. While many truck drivers may be applauded and being heralded as the quote-unquote hero in some of these cases, we all can possibly make a difference where we live, when we travel, and by getting others involved too. I'm lucky to have seen my state trucking association embrace Truckers Against Trafficking, and Phoenix, Arizona was the place where a TAT logoed truck was recently auctioned to benefit their cause. Today, we will learn from Kylla Lanier. She is the Deputy Director and co-founder of Truckers Against Trafficking. This is a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization that exists to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking and travel plaza industry to combat domestic sex trafficking. Kylla speaks around the country about TAT's mission and how the trucking industry is combating human trafficking. Ms. Lanier also handles social media for TAT, including managing the Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. She's been involved in the fight against human trafficking since 2007, when she helped initiate the state coalition against trafficking in Oklahoma. So as you can tell, she's quite a busy woman. She's fully engaged in this organization and has passion for it. And it's my pleasure and my honor to now turn this over to Kylla, and we welcome her and thank her for sharing with us today. Kylla?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to tell you a little bit about human trafficking as well as TAT's work, and then how each one of us can play a role in combating human trafficking. So I'm going to get started with a short Human Trafficking 101. So human trafficking is the exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of either commercial sex, and you can think brothels, street prostitution, those massage parlors with happy endings, pornography, strip clubs, or forced labor in agricultural, construction work, the nail salons, domestic labor, things of that nature, wherein a third party, that other person, is making a profit off of the labor. And human trafficking is modern day slavery. I do want to really delineate between these two issues, smuggling versus trafficking, especially in light of the case that took place in San Antonio recently. The chief of police in San Antonio called it a trafficking case when it was in fact a smuggling case. Smuggling is a crime against a border. It's when somebody pays to come across a border without the proper documentation. It is, in that case, with those immigrants. They had paid a coyote to bring them across into the United States, and there was a tragic ending to that particular incident. Trafficking, of course, is a crime against a person, like we just discussed. They're being compelled into a labor situation or a commercial sex situation against their will, and somebody's making a profit off of them. So that is the difference between smuggling and trafficking. Now, a smuggled person can easily become a trafficking victim, and we look at why, and that's the vulnerability. Smuggled people have a higher vulnerability to trafficking. One, they don't typically speak the language of the country they're entering, and so traffickers can prey on that. They're not going to know who to ask for help, where to ask for help. They're not going to understand their surroundings. Number two, they're typically fleeing a situation, either poverty or violence in their own country, and so they're not going to want to go back to their home country. And so again, that exploiter, that trafficker is going to be able to take advantage of them. And number three, they recognize that they've committed a crime by paying to come across a border without the proper documentation. And so when they're being exploited, they are less likely to go to law enforcement. They're not going to ask for help. And so all of those things make them more susceptible to a trafficker. Now, are all people who are smuggled, do they all become trafficking victims? Absolutely not. And do all trafficking victims in the United States, are they all immigrants from other countries? No. We have plenty of victims that are US born, and we'll talk about them. I do want to dispel a few myths as we go through this. And myth number one is we live in a slavery-free world. I used to teach US history to sophomores, and we started at the 13th Amendment with the Civil War. And the 13th Amendment is the abolition of slavery. And I will tell you that in every country of the world, slavery is illegal. But in every country of the world, there is still slavery, including in the United States. And I would liken that to, we have laws against murder, we have laws against rape, but we of course still have murder and rape in our world. And so just because you have a law against it, just because it's illegal, and we've said that it's morally wrong or just not okay or tolerable anymore, does not mean that it actually goes away. So I just want to give you some global statistics here. There are 21 million victims of human trafficking in our world today. This encompasses the sex trafficking victims, labor trafficking victims. It also encompasses organ trafficking victims, these people that have their organs harvested out of them, and their organs are then sold on the black market to the highest bidder. And also child soldiers. There are countries where illegal guerrilla wars are taking place. There's not enough soldiers willingly signing up, and so they go into villages, they kidnap children, and they compel them into service as soldiers and as sex victims, sex slaves. And so all of that is encompassed in that 21 million. Human trafficking is a $150 billion annual industry. And so the main motivator for traffickers is money. This is a greed operation, whether it's that businessman who recognizes that he can triple his profits by not paying his workers, or that pimp who can run 2 or 3 girls and make a lot of money for very little output on his end. It's a money operation, and they're not looking at the human costs at all. This is a bottom line issue. Human trafficking is happening in all 50 states, including DC. The National Human Trafficking Hotline has received calls of both labor and sex trafficking in every state in our country. 1 in 6 runaways are at risk of being trafficked. And again, we go back to the vulnerability. Runaways are obviously going to have a higher vulnerability because they lack a home, they lack shelter, they lack food, money, the sense of safety, a warm shower, any of those types of things. And so exploiters, both in the form of traffickers and buyers of commercial sex, are really preying on our kids out there that are runaways. They're also highly vulnerable because of the fact that many people run away from home, not all, but many kids run away from home because they are experiencing abuse or they're witnessing abuse at home. So they're already predisposed to that. And so these buyers of commercial sex and these traffickers are coming up and saying, I'll feed you, but this is what you have to do in return. I'll give you a place to stay tonight, but this is what you're going to have to do. Or I'll take care of you and I'll make sure that you have a bed every night, but you're going to have to earn your rent in a certain way. And so they're being exploited because of that vulnerability. And a victim may be forced to have sex up to 20 times a day. Now that's a really nice euphemism, isn't it? They're having sex up to 20 times a day. They're being raped up to 20 times a day. Just because money exchanges hands does not mean the act is consensual. And you guys probably all know somebody in your family, in your friends group, in your workplace, in your church, in your community that has experienced a rape. And you saw their journey back from that, physically to feel safe again and to heal, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to really come to themselves again and be back to their whole healthy self. Now imagine that person in your mind, and imagine that that rape happens to them every day. 5 times every day. 10 times. 20. What starts to happen in these people's minds is they have to start to justify it and internalize this, because how else do you deal with that level of trauma? You can't process that. There's no physical way. And so what starts to happen is they develop this tough shell. So the prostituted person that you may encounter might be really rough. They might be saying stuff like, man, I earn money for what other people give away for free. This is what I'm good at. That's not my pimp. That's my boyfriend. That's my man over there. And so they have this sort of exterior that's very rough, but it is because they are having to somehow figure out how to survive that level of trauma. And so they own it in a way. And so when we've worked with survivors around the country, they all say, oh man, if you had come up to me on the street, I would have told you this was my choice. This was my choice. But you're not looking at all that trauma in behind. So what I would tell you is, if you ever do encounter a prostituted person and they have that rougher edge to them, just think back to your friend or your colleague that you know, your loved one who has been raped. And imagine if that trauma was being put upon them every single day, over and over and over, and show a little bit more compassion for them, because it is a rough go of it. Myth number 2, how many of you, when I say pimp, this is what you think of? Unfortunately, this stereotype of the African-American male with his chains, with his bling, with his pimp cane and his fur and all of that stuff, this is the myth that's put out there by media in our video games, in our movies, in our television shows. And it's really unfortunate, because the reality is traffickers look like you and me. They're teachers, they're law enforcement officers, they're every race, every nationality, both genders, all different ages. They're a grandpa as well as your fellow cheerleader at your high school. They can be anybody. And so we have to start to look at that. Here's just a smattering of some traffickers that have made the news and been convicted. Again, you see both genders here. You see different nationalities, different races. And so, again, it could be somebody that's highly educated and powerful, like a diplomat, that is exploiting one of their own countrymen into forced labor situations or sex trafficking situations. It can be a mom who is selling her child for drug money. It can be the teacher that is exploiting a young person under their care to make extra money. This is the reality. Human trafficking is everywhere, and it can be anybody. And this is Beth. Beth Jacobs is a field trainer for TAT now, and when she was 16 years old, her parents got a divorce. She lived in a really tiny town in Minnesota, and when her parents got a divorce, she wanted to go live with her dad. She was her dad's favorite, and she liked him a lot more than her mom, and so she wanted to move with him over to Minneapolis. And he told her that absolutely she could do that, but she had to get her GED and she had to get a job, and she agreed to that, no problem. So when she got to Minneapolis, she realized that she had to take the bus system and learn the bus system in order to get around, in order to get her applications out to the different job placements. And so as she was going around, the bus stop happened to be in front of a pool hall and a bar. And one day she was out there after filling out applications around town, and a guy was out there and told her, hey, come on in and shoot a game of pool. And she's like, man, I can't go in there. I'm only 16. They won't let me into a bar. And he says, no, I own the place. Come on in. So she goes in there, and much to her surprise, they let her shoot a game of pool and they give her a beer to drink. And she felt like any teenager would, like an adult. She felt sophisticated. She felt cool. She felt like she had this new group of friends. And it just became a regular habit for her every day or every couple days when she was downtown, when she would, right before she'd go home, she'd go in, shoot a game of pool, have a beer. During the course of the job hunt, she met these 2 guys, Miko and Mo, and they took her to their house, had a barbecue, asked her a bunch of questions about herself, and then they drove her home that night. So again, she just continues her normal routine. And one day she goes in on the weekend on Saturday, and she shoots her game of pool. She comes back out for the bus, and she missed the bus. The schedule had changed on Saturday. And she called her dad, and he came and got her, but he was angry and just yelled at her the whole time. You have to be more responsible. I have to work late. This isn't okay. I needed my sleep. And she's like, you're right. You're right. I don't want to go back and live with mom. I'll do better. I promise. I promise. So she goes down. Somebody needed some paperwork from her. So she goes down the next day on a Sunday, and she is watching her watch. She is going to make sure that she makes that new bus time. And she comes running out of the pool hall to make the bus, and lo and behold, she misses it again because the bus schedule changed again on Sunday. Now, do you think she called her dad? No. She walks right back into that bar, and she's determined to get a ride home and not bother her dad again because she doesn't want to make him upset. And she sees Mo in there, and she asks him if he can give her a ride home, and he says, yeah, absolutely. I've got Miko's car. We're going to go meet him at a party, and then he'll drive you home. And she was like, well, I'll be later than I want, but that works, and I get to see Miko again. And she had a bit of a crush on Miko. So she gets in the car with Mo. He gives her something to drink, and that's the last thing that she remembers until she wakes up. She wakes up, it's pitch black outside. They're at a truck stop, and she's immediately scared because she knew it shouldn't be that dark. And she asks him where they are, and he said, oh, we're at a truck stop, and you're going to make some money for me right now. And she's like, what do you mean? And he said, do you know what I am? And she said, no. And he said, I'm a pimp. And she said, well, that's great, but that's not the kind of girl I am. And she tries to get out of the car. He grabs her by the hair, pulls her back, and he says, no, bitch, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, this is what you're going to do. He gives her to the truck driver, puts her in the cab of the truck. He rapes her. She cries the whole time, asks him for help. Truck driver returns her to the pimp and says, hey, I want my money back. She cried too much, and I didn't enjoy myself. And so the pimp beats her up right there again in front of everybody. And then he takes her to Chicago and says, if you ever lose money for me again, I'll kill you and your dad. And remember, he had taken her home that one time, so she knew he knew where her dad lived. And that began 6 years in the life for Beth Jacobs. She was trafficked into 3 different states. She had 3 different traffickers during that time before she was able to escape. And this is Tuan McCarty. She also now works for Truckers Against Trafficking, sharing her story and training law enforcement. When she was 12 years old, she was raped by 2 neighborhood boys, and she started running away. She didn't know how to process it. She didn't feel like she could tell her mom what had happened, and she was just struggling. And so she would run away, and her mom interpreted her running away as just wild teen behavior. And so at 15, Tuan ran away for good, and she met a guy on the street who bought her a burger and talked to her and listened to her as she told him her story. And he said, you know, I can help you. I've got a place for you where you can stay. Come with me. And so she gets in the car with him. They go to Atlanta, and lo and behold, he's got a bunch of women and young girls at his place, and he starts to turn her out. And so she ends up being a trafficking victim for the next 10 years of her life. She becomes addicted to drugs. She said to mask the pain of what she was having to go through every single day of her life. That she was almost murdered multiple times, that she was raped and beaten. Half of her face does not move because of the severe beatings that she had taken by both the traffickers as well as the buyers of commercial sex. And unfortunately, this is the reality of what sex trafficking looks like in the United States of America. And this is from a pimp's mouth. Now, we've cleaned up this quote quite a lot, but it says, there's no better feeling in the world for me than turning a girl into a prostitute. It's a special feeling that very few ever get to experience. The satisfaction comes from knowing that if you walked up to her the first time you met her and told her what your plan was, she'd run the other way. But through some sweet talking and careful planning and execution, this girl's about to go sleep with dudes for money and bring it to you. It's a great feeling. And so you see here that traffickers, again, they do not care about what they're doing to the person. They know they're lying. And that brings us to the means that traffickers use. It's that force, fraud, or coercion. Obviously, in that quote, it's fraud. I mean, he says if you went up to her and told her what you were going to make her do, she'd run the other way. So they're lying. They're telling you, they're selling you that dream. Force is obviously those beatings that we talked about, rapes, gang rapes, torture, branding, where they put a tattoo of ownership on the victim, burning them, things of that nature. Fraud's the promise of one thing, the delivery of another. You're going to be a movie star, you're going to be a musician, you're going to be a model, you're going to be a maid at a really nice resort, you're going to have this and that, but then obviously that's not what's delivered. You actually have to pay off this debt, or you're actually going to have to work here. No, you can't leave. And fraud is oftentimes obviously coupled with force. And then coercion. Coercion is probably the one that is most often used, but it's also the one that's hardest to prove. And those are going to be your threats of violence against the family, your threats of violence against that person. It's going to be that shame of nobody wants you anymore. Look how worthless you are. Once a hoe, always a hoe. That type of ideology that gets impressed upon these victims on a daily basis that they begin to internalize. And so they're scared. It's those invisible chains that keep them bound to their traffickers, so that they don't feel like they have any other way of living. They have no other viable options out there, and so they end up staying. And myth number 3, it doesn't happen in my hometown. You know, I do travel all across the United States, and I think we've gotten past, for the most part, people saying, well, I knew it happened in other countries, but not here in the United States. I think most people recognize that it does happen in the United States. But there's still denial about it happening in their city or their town. It's easy for them to believe that it's happening in Houston or Los Angeles or New York City, or some of these bigger cities, but they don't want to believe that it's happening in their town. And what I would tell you is, big town, small town, countryside, city, it's happening everywhere. If you have schools in your town, if you have a mall in your city, if you have internet in your home, there are traffickers that are in all of these locations looking to prey on our young people, whether that's young adults or our teens and our children. And so it's important that we are aware of that, so that we can empower our kids and teach them the right things, so that they know what to look for and to trust their own gut. And really it comes back to these guys. These are the buyers of commercial sex. And, I run the Facebook and social media for Truckers Against Trafficking. And when I post a story about a trafficker getting caught up and convicted of a crime, everybody is 100% excited about that, and they cheer it, and they're happy that they got convicted. When we post a story about a buyer bust where law enforcement are doing a sting on Johns, if you will, there's mixed reaction, strong mixed reaction, and they defend the buyers. They say, well, they didn't know any better. Well, it's victimless crime. Well, it's the world's oldest profession, things of this nature, and they defend them. But I just want to take you back to that slide that we talked about earlier, that it's a $150 billion annual industry. What is the main motivator for traffickers? It's money. And who is giving them money? The buyers are giving them money. So if we have to start looking at that. We've created a society that says it's okay to buy sex from other people. It's okay to do that men are somehow entitled to women's bodies to do those things. And again, we have brought up those myths of saying it's a victimless crime. You've heard Beth's and Tawan's stories. Did they sound like victims? I think they did. You've heard the world's oldest profession. It's not the world's oldest profession. Farming actually is, so you can correct your friends, but it is the world's oldest oppression. This is not a job. This is something that's happening to them. And so it's important that we start looking at that demand side of things and making it a higher penalty, instead of just slapping their wrists and saying boys will be boys and letting them go off their way. They are allowing this industry to flourish. And perhaps you've heard of this case. This is Laura Sorensen and Alder Hadza. They pulled their RV into a truck stop in January of 2015 in Virginia, and police were quickly called to the scene. Now, I had the opportunity to interview Trooper Stephanie McFall from the Virginia State Police, and she said that when they arrived on the scene, they asked if they could enter the RV, and that Sorensen and Hadza said, yeah, absolutely. And they were in there, as well as another person, a young woman. And she said right off the bat, it was just weird. Sorensen and Hadza were like overly giddy to be talking to law enforcement. They were oversharing. They were happy, like really happy to be talking to officers. And she said that's just not the normal response. And she said the other young woman, she had greasy hair. It was pulled up into a top bun, that she looked very pale, but she was heavily made up, and she just kept her head down and wasn't talking. At one point, Sorensen and Hadza pointed out of the front of their RV, and a couple of the officers were looking out the front of the RV with them. And at that moment, the young woman looked up at Trooper McFall and made a face, like, help me face. And at that point, Trooper McFall decided she was going to take her out of the RV and talk to her. And so she did. And once she was out of the line of sight of Sorensen and Hadza, she told her everything. She said she was 20 years old. She had been kidnapped out of Iowa 2 weeks prior. That they had raped her, beaten her, burned her entire body with instruments that they had heated on the RV stove. They had been making her call home every couple of days to her parents to tell them that she was fine, she was on a road trip with friends, and that she would be back soon. So nobody had reported her missing. They had threatened to kill her whole family if she didn't cooperate. And then they were starting to sell her for commercial sex through ads they had posted on Craigslist advertising sex acts. And I will guarantee you that the men that were purchasing her saw an adult woman, victimless crime, but they weren't seeing what was happening behind the scenes. She said she hadn't eaten in over a week. She didn't know the last time she had anything to drink, and she physically felt like she was dying. And doctors said that had she not been rescued that day, that she would have died within a couple of days from her injuries and the malnutrition. And again, this is the reality of sex trafficking in the United States. So when we looked at this issue, it's so big, you know, this problem is so big, global domestic labor sex trafficking, we thought, what can we do to really make an impact, and what group of people could make a strong impact? And we thought the professional truck drivers. They're the eyes and ears of our nation's highways. They see things other people don't see. They're trained to be vigilant, and they may be intersecting with victims through the normal course of their jobs at some of the areas that they stop at, whether that's truck stops and rest areas, or hotels and motels, city streets, bus terminals, gas stations, etc. So that if they could look past this idea of she's just a prostitute to she's somebody who potentially needs help, we could really make a difference. And so we started Truckers Against Trafficking in 2009 to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking and travel plaza industry to combat human trafficking as a part of their normal jobs. We have 3 goals to accomplish that. The first is to saturate trucking and related industries with our materials. We have a lot of different materials, and I'm just going to go through a few of them with you. The first is a training DVD, and if you are interacting with any carriers or any trucking companies at all, talk to them about our training materials. It's trucking specific. The whole training could be done in 28 minutes. We have a condensed version that they could do the entire training in less than 15 minutes. And I'm going to show you the 3-minute trailer of this video.
My son and I were driving through Oklahoma City, had the radio on, and the guy comes on the radio, hey, anybody want any underage girls?
This one, she didn't even look 13, 14 years old. She had a little mini skirt on.
A 14-year-old, 15-year-old is not doing this on her own accord.
You have to wonder who's behind them.
They have a pimp, or whatever you want to call them, trafficker.
Sex trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. It's when traffickers are using force, fraud, or coercion to compel an individual to engage in commercial sex. And traffickers are not only exploiting the victims, but they're also exploiting these locations. Everything from commercial front brothels to residential brothels to hotels and motels to truck stops to street-based prostitution. A lot of exploitation is happening online. That's where a lot of the connections are being made.
Nobody wakes up and says, gosh, I'd really like to sell myself on the streets today. That is something that is being directed by the victimizer, by the trafficker.
Here we are, you know, I'm 15 years old, my cousin is 14, and we're here at a truck stop, you know, being forced to work it, you know, and we're young girls, terrified out of our minds.
The trucking industry is in a unique position because they actually will be in locations that pimps will bring in their victims.
Truckers Against Trafficking is a grassroots organization. It comes alongside the trucking industry, recognizing that they're the eyes and ears of our nation's highways. They're in places that most people aren't, and that they can recognize potential victims of human trafficking more than the rest of us.
You're talking about a really highly trained group of individuals that are seeing trafficking, they know where to report it, they're reporting it right away, and as a result, we have seen countless victims who've been recovered by law enforcement.
When we talk about who's driving change in this area, we have to talk about the American trucking industry.
Thank God what saved me was that truck driver that called in and said, hey, you know, this is whoever at the truck stop, you know, and we have some girls out here that look pretty young.
Oh, that trucker. The one that made that phone call. Boy, I owe him a lot. And if he ever sees this, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I am a team truck driver with my husband, Bob.
Been a 16-year veteran of over-the-road truck driving.
I've been driving for 26 years.
And I am a trucker against trafficking.
And I'm a trucker against trafficking.
I'm a trucker against trafficking.
And I am a trucker against trafficking.
And then beyond our training video, we also have a wallet card. And the wallet card we really want to see in the hands of every industry professional. It has the National Human Trafficking Hotline on the outside of the card. And then on the inside of the card, it has a definition of what trafficking is, but it also has three little separate areas here. First is tips that law enforcement would want in order to really be able to do a solid investigation of the tip that you're calling in. So let's get a description of the car or the occupants of the vehicle. If you can take a picture with your phone, those are pieces of evidence that law enforcement can use. When exactly is this taking place? Where exactly is it taking place? So that they can respond as the crime is happening. If they happen to engage a potential victim, that they have some questions that they could ask. Do you get to keep your own money? If not, who does? When was the last time you saw your family members? Almost every trafficking survivor that I've talked to, they said, man, even though I didn't have a good relationship with my family, or the ones that did have a good relationship with their family, they're like, man, I missed my family. You know, when you're out on the street, if somebody had asked me that, I would have burst into tears, you know. And so asking some of those simple questions that could lead to a conversation, that could lead to asking for help, those are really important. But even if you just stay in your cab, or even if you're in your car and you see something and you don't want to actually engage it, here's some red flags at a truck stop or a rest area or a hotel or motel. Is there flashing lights indicating a commercial sex buyer? Is there CV chatter for commercial company? Do you see a minor being sold for commercial sex? No matter how they're acting, no matter how they're dressed, it doesn't really matter if it's anybody under age of 18. You don't even have to prove force, fraud, or coercion for a minor. If they're being sold for sex, that's a trafficking victim. Do you see branding tattoos on them? Are they talking about having to meet a quota or making a certain amount of money before they can go home? Are they talking about their daddy? Things of this nature would all indicate potential trafficking. Is a car pulling up, dropping somebody off at a cab, and then leaving and coming back 15, 20 minutes later and picking them up? Is there an RV or a van parked in a location that's sort of strange and people are coming to and from it? Again, anything that seems off, it's worth making that call. And then I'm sure you guys are all in the industry to a degree, in that you're working with carriers. And so you've probably heard the term lot lizard. It's just the common term for a prostituted person at a truck stop. We have lot lizard, recreational reptile, commercial company, etc. And then in larger society, we say things like slut, whore, hoe, hooker, prostitute. All of these words and all of these terms are very dehumanizing. And when we're calling somebody a reptile, or we're calling them a hoe, we're not looking at them as somebody deserving of respect or honor or dignity. I have a a 23-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter, and if you called them any of those names, like, I would be upset. Like, I would have words with you over that, because it's not acceptable. I know who they are as these complete people, and so we would not use that terminology for anybody that we actually care about. And unfortunately, when we are calling people names, we're not looking at them as a potential victim. And so we have to shift that paradigm. And so we created different stickers to replace those no lot lizard stickers. And it asks the question, do you need help? And has the hotline number on there. And so it's just that shifting of it. We like the guys that have the no lot lizard stickers. It means they're not buying commercial sex. We want them on our team. We just need them to stop looking at the prostituted person as the problem. We need them to start looking at her as the potential victim and helping. Our second goal is to partner with law enforcement and government agencies to facilitate the investigation of human trafficking. We want the bad guys to go to jail, and we don't want them to have access to other people. Just because you take one or recover them from the scene, the trafficker is going to still keep doing what they're doing. The buyers are going to keep doing what they're doing until they are held accountable. So we do that through calls and tips into the national hotline, 911, and local sheriff's office. We do law enforcement trainings around the country. We work with FBI and other law enforcement agencies that want to work with the trucking industry to gather intelligence and do scouting at particular locations. We do coalition builds by working with the state's attorney general's office and bringing together law enforcement officers as well as trucking industry stakeholders, and doing a 4-hour networking session in human trafficking conference. And then through our Iowa MVE model, we work with motor vehicle enforcement, commercial vehicle enforcement officers around the country, both educating them on the signs to look for in trafficking, but also teaching them that the trucking industry is their ally in this fight, and that together we can close loopholes to traffickers. And our last goal is to marshal the resources of our partners to combat this crime. We do that through corporate sponsorships and strategic partnerships, and we do that through just all of the different entry points into the industry. So with insurance, you guys are talking with companies and carriers and owner operators around the country, and just really using your influence. That's huge. Using your influence to talk about it, to talk about TAT, to pass out those wallet cards, to make available the information, or to make those introductions. This is truly, it's all of us working together and all of us figuring out ways that we can combat it. And one of the things we've been able to do through our partnerships is to create our Freedom Drivers Project, which is a 48-foot trailer that travels around the country, and inside it's essentially a little museum. We have survivor artifacts on the inside of the trailer from victims that basically illustrate their stories and the push and pull factors into the life. We have what the trucking industry is doing, but we also have a whole exhibit that talks about how each one of us intersects with trafficking and what we can do in our communities, in our homes, and in our workplaces to really combat it and make a difference. These are just some of our partners, and honestly, we couldn't do it without the trucking industry. TAT is the industry, and the industry, works with TAT. I mean, we would be nothing without all of the different groups that support us, that have taken on this mission and owned it. Trafficking happens in a lot of different industries, but it's the trucking industry that has stood up and said, we're going to do something about it instead of ignoring it. And they stand as a model to other nations. They stand as a model to other industries. And that's what's really exciting, is people are wanting to replicate this model because of the impact the trucking industry is having. And it is working. This is just some information from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. This is just one slice of the data pie. There is no national database for 911, but the hotline has received over 1,830 calls into the hotline, identifying likely 525 human trafficking cases that have involved over 970 victims of human trafficking. And again, we hear anecdotally all the time from truck drivers and truck stop employees that say they also dialed 911 instead of calling the hotline. And so we don't know the full impact. This was a survey that we did last year, and we had just 1,574 respondents. And of just those 1,574 respondents, there were another likely 532 cases, and almost all of them called 911. And so that's really interesting to note. Again, we don't know the full impact, but we know that truck drivers and truck stop employees are starting to view the prostituted person very differently. They're starting to view this crime very differently, and they're making the call. They're not ignoring it. They're doing something about it. And this is Kevin Kimmel, and it comes back to him and the 3 million other drivers who safely and efficiently deliver our products each and every day. Kevin was a Conway driver. Now he works for CFI, and he happened to pull his truck into the same truck stop as Laura Sorensen and Alder Hadza pulled their RV into, and he's the driver that made the call. But I'm going to let Kevin tell his story.
I finished up night deliveries early in the morning. Ended up finding a truck stop about 40 miles outside of Richmond, Virginia to take my 10-hour break. So I was filling out my paperwork, and 2 slots over there was an RV. This one was back in the truck lot, and it didn't look typical. It was kind of beat up, had black curtains. I saw a middle-aged man walk out and knock on the door. Well, the door opens, he goes in, and I'm still filling my paperwork out. And I looked over and I saw what looked to me to be a young girl look out. And then she vanished. Like she was pulled away from the window and the curtain was pushed back over. And I thought, you know, this is a bad situation here. Nothing was reminding me of what a family situation would be. And I thought about it another couple minutes and I said, you know, this could be something pretty ominous. And so I just got the smartphone out, gave him a call and told him where I was and what I thought might be going on. And not 5 minutes later, 2 sheriff vehicles and 2 state troopers pulled in. And from there, kind of unwound. I feel real good about being able to put 2 people in prison that don't need to be out floating around.
You know, traffickers have done an amazing job convincing us that she's just a prostitute and that we should just turn and look the other way. And this is a really highly effective business model for them, isn't it? Because we're all looking away, and they and the buyers are effectively raping America's women and children and making a ton of money while doing it. And they've also convinced us that this problem is too big, too dark, and too heavy for us to do anything about it. But they are wrong. If traffickers count on our ignorance and our apathy, that nobody knows and nobody cares enough to do anything about this, then we must know and we must care. And time again, history has borne this out. History has shown that when good men and good women do care and do know and get involved, they can actually change a person's life.
Truckers Against Trafficking is like the glue that's going to bond the industry. You guys are the ones that are putting out the materials, you're putting out all the information. Everybody's got smartphones now, everybody's on Facebook. I mean, just the sheer barrage of the information has done nothing but good. When they go through the orientation, they see the video, they get the decals, they also get the wallet cards. And the wallet cards is just a simple way to refresh your memory about what it is that's going on out there. If you see certain traits, this is the number to call. You know, at the end of the day, you get your load there, you get it there safe, you get it delivered on time, and maybe you save somebody's life. What I've learned is human trafficking is a huge problem. You know, and now I have an understanding there's an oppressor, there's the oppressed, and they're not doing this to make money for college or whatever your thought might be. They're doing this to stay alive because there's somebody on the other end of it forcing it.
That's the power of the trucking industry. That's the power of someone who has the courage to take a second look. And that's what trucking is able to do. That's what taxi drivers or bus drivers or law enforcement personnel or hotel workers, whoever you may be, wherever you are, if you take that second look, then what you're able to do by getting involved is you are effectively helping to change a life. And that's what we're asking for. You know, Kevin Kimmel had the courage to look again. Kevin Kimmel recognized, you know what, there's something not right. And he had the courage to make a call and get involved. And now he's helped unlock her pathway back to freedom. No matter what it may look like on the outside, no matter what it may seem like that moment in that parking lot or wherever you may be, that person is a human being. She's so much more. She is not just a victim in that moment, but she is a survivor. She is an overcomer. She is somebody that has a future. And we need the courage to look again. We need the courage to see that our actions in this moment will unlock the path to her freedom.
Well, I got a call from the state police. They wanted to know if I could release my phone number to her, and I said, yeah, that'd be fine. And I think she was still in the hospital. And she told me how much she appreciated it. And she said something to the regards of a guardian angel, and it's like, no, that's not the case, you know. I just made a phone call, and I'm glad I could help you, and I hope you go on and have a healthy and happy life. Try to put this thing behind you. We need to get back to a place where if somebody is in need, that we step up to it. There's a lot of things in life that aren't so obvious. This isn't one of them. My name is Kevin Kimmel, and I'm a trucker against trafficking.
So how do you get involved? I would tell you, spread the word with trucking professionals. You're interacting with them. I would also talk about it in your own homes with your kids, with people that you know, any young people in your lives, any others. Dispel those myths and really talk to people honestly about what's happening out there and how everybody can play a role. Make intros between TAT and carriers. If you are representing different companies and carriers and they've never heard of TAT, do an introduction. My email will be at the end of this. Just introduce them via email to me and we will take it from there. But really it is using those relationships that you have and leveraging that to just say, hey, this is really important and maybe you should take a look at it. All of our materials are free to members of the trucking industry. We do not charge for them. And then you can support TAT. You can support TAT by having those wallet cards out at your office, by sending them out with new packets to people that you're working with. You can do that through financial sponsorship, coming to any of our events that we have in your area. These are the types of things that you could do to get involved. Here's my information. You can email me, call me, and just let me know what's going on. And again, it's been my privilege to be here today and to talk to you about this. Anyway, any ideas that you have for getting involved further, please let me know. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Why don't you flip back to that last one for just a minute, if you would, Kylla? I can't say thank you enough. I bit my tongue. Some other moderators like to jump in, but you do such a great job, and the message is so clear. I'd simply have to say, wow. While I've heard the message many times, I'm still amazed at how you can stay so engaged and determined, and yet it's pretty obvious what changes, influences, and help you are providing out in society. And I thank you, because as I listened again, I sighed so many times as you presented. But this truly does and has been making a positive influence. I believe the one story that of the young girl from Iowa, how they'd even cut her feet, to prevent her from escaping. I mean, it's the victims have such horrific stories that they've lived through. And so thank you for helping to show this group how trucking can impact society. These are good citizens. Truckers are good, concerned citizens, and they're not all smugglers or criminals. And this is truly a way that we can engage with them to be a part of doing something good. So I again listen, and I share that compassion call that you presented early on in your message, that's truly what inspired my friend Don Blake over at Inland Kenworth. He heard this story, he wanted to get involved. That's what led that tractor to the auction benefit. I mean, that's what inspired him. He couldn't drive down the streets of Phoenix anymore, is what he told me, and just label people and continue to drive by without finding a way to start doing some help. So this is a great way, as you said, to help overcome the world's oldest oppression.
Yes.
That one stuck in my head. And, it's right in front of us here. You're open to an email to guide. I know you have a lot of resources on your site, the 800 number, the text number that you gave us, the training videos. I think it's great that we can all truly, as you said, partner and influence others. I wrote that down, spread the word, make the introductions, and help support. So I encourage all of my fellow members of this organization, the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation. We are quote unquote different, and I mean that in a positive way. We are out to be different providers of insurance products and services than others, and I think this is a great opportunity for us. So anything else, Kylla, that you'd like to share here? I thank you many times over again for your time and how you're helping to share the word here with us today. Anything else you'd like to share with us before our final slide?
I would just say, thank you so much for the opportunity. And, trafficking is an everywhere problem. And so it's an everybody solution. And all of us doing our part, we really can make a difference. I know it seems overwhelming sometimes, but you take your small part, you do your part, and it matters. It truly, truly, truly matters. And so I would just encourage you not to be discouraged, but to learn a little bit more and do what you can. And we are very grateful for anything that you can do.
Again, thank you. Could you flip to my last slide? Thank you again. And nope, you're fine. The foundation has these monthly webinars. And so as we wrap this one up, I remind you the second Thursday of next month, 2 p.m. will be our next opportunity to have a truck stop topic come up. So keep that in mind, watch for the invite. And with that, I'll say that's a wrap. Thank you, Kylla and Beth, for your support today, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.